Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The murders in France are over. Where should the show escargot move next? The Young and the Restless July 28th episode featured the dramatic conclusion to the Aristotle Dumas and Murder in the Maze storylines. And what can we say? It was a mixed bag. Let us have a discussion, shall we? The good, the bad, and the WTH? On the one hand, we appreciated the show's commitment. The train car sets were particularly impressive. And we enjoy massive surprises like the one Kane pulled off. On the other hand, we have to wonder, is a murder mystery truly a mystery when it is clear from the start who the perpetrator must be? There was just one viable suspect, the strange new disposable character. Case closed. And why was Kane certain that someone would try to kill him? Everyone he trapped on that mountain was angry with him. Who wouldn't be? However, it was never homicidal. Carter Y&R. We're also interested about what we were assured would be massive, like nothing else in daytime. Perhaps massive characterizes the risk that the Young and the Restless made, and we've had to admire a big swing. Perhaps like nothing else in daytime? Hedges, perhaps? 2-for-1 deal on legacy characters. We were also perplexed by the fact that the show dropped Damien after retconning Amy's tale, recasting, and returning her solely to give Nate a half-brother. For how long? Several months? It seems like a lot of effort to bring on a character for whom the show has no long-term plans. More recent departures from the Young and the Restless. Why kill Chance? Why exactly? He wasn't exactly in the middle of the plot, so wouldn't it have been just as simple, and perhaps more savvy, to have him leave town and return in a few years? However, we always say, shock us, damn it. And it was surprising that Young and Restless would send Chance to the tomb rather than, say, Peoria. What's next? Kane will undoubtedly continue his pursuit of Lily, and he may even have an advantage, given his willingness to switch places with her as Carter's hostage. But is anyone really yearning for a Lane rematch featuring a recast Kane? We'd still like the program to attempt Lily in a romance with Nick, but the July 28th episode makes it quite plain that it will be. Kane remarries Lily and helps Damien raise his child. According to the Young and the Restless spoilers, Kane Ashby's scheme failed spectacularly. 3 deaths changed his dreams for reconciliation with Lily Winters into the worst-case scenario. Lily was already repulsed by her ex-husband, who is also the father of their twins. That was before Chance Chancellor was killed by Carter's uncontrolled hand. Carter assassinated Damien Kane, believing he was assisting Kane. However, the misdirected consequence did not lead Kane to Lily, as Stalba's character had planned, putting a knife into Damien Kane's back. The writing staff deserves credit for adapting what, in retrospect, was a purposefully sleepy storyline into a controlled remote setting. Kane's estate, which included the maze, his office outfitted with monitoring devices, and other train car compartments, was initially intriguing. However, as the captive individual became more agitated, viewers became increasingly frustrated. The apparent goal of this prolonged scenario was to create tension, which resulted in the shocking toss of a knife into Damien's back after he and Kane had been drugged. The image of Kane clutching the suddenly deceased Damien while Phyllis Summers happened upon them was fantastic television. That instantly revealed why the slow drip, intricate tale was established. Lily Winters' life changes dramatically. Lily and Damien grew close in recent months. Her mistrust of Nate Hastings revealed sibling grew into something unexpected. Damien was smitten from the start, but Lily needed time to form her sentiments. That concluded in this realized couple spending the night together in a train compartment. The logical conclusion is that Damien will live on through a kid Lily will have conceived during their time together. Carter achieved his purpose, as killing Damien means Lily is single. Kane Ashby fixed on goal. Kane became a billionaire thanks to his alleged late father's assistance. Colin Atkinson is claimed to have mended his life before dying. Part of that endeavor includes assisting his son in achieving what is described as significant financial independence. Kane used his newfound income to organize a gathering at his house in the south of France. Kane's goal of acquiring control of all notable enterprises in Genoa City, Wisconsin, always looked unrealistic. However, despite her current affections for him, his intended reunion with Lily is now possible, albeit a lot of plot would be required to make that a reality. Lily is not in the mood to fall in love with Kane again. However, sentiments will improve once everyone returns to GC, Damien and Chance's funerals are held, and the summer and fall episodes air.
Kane and Lily still have a romantic connection. The recast character Flynn now plays holds that card, but will need patience as he restarts his life in what will be a created hostile environment. The murders in France are finally over, the Aristotle Dumas chessboard has been cleared, and the shadowy, suffocating corridors of Kane Ashby's estate, with its sinister hedge maze, sterile office full of surveillance monitors, and those eerily claustrophobic train compartments that doubled as makeshift prisons, have been abandoned. But, how does it justify where it has been? Because for all the spectacle, the knife in Damien's back, Chance bleeding out after Carter's psychotic breakdown, Phyllis stumbling into Kane cradling Damien's lifeless body, and the supposed massive gamble of shooting a murder mystery in a mountain estate that the producers hyped as like nothing else in daytime, the storyline left viewers divided between awe and exasperation, and the aftermath is what will determine if this entire arc is remembered as a bold experiment or a bloated, self-indulgent detour. So let's unpack where things could escargot from here, starting with the obvious, Kane Ashby himself, because no character emerges from this arc as morally compromised yet narratively vital as Kane, whose bid to win back Lily Winters by staging what he thought would be a controlled gathering of Genoa City's power players, part olive branch, part trap, part mad bid to consolidate influence, spiraled into a blood-soaked disaster that left him looking like a reckless, manipulative sociopath rather than the brooding anti-hero the writers seemed to want, and while Kane trading places with Lily as Carter's hostage momentarily cast him as a selfless hero, the reality is that 3 deaths, including Damien's, whom Carter eliminated believing he was helping Kane, Chance's, whose final breath in France rocked the Newman and Chancellor families, and Carter's own suicide, are on Kane's conscience, making his professed devotion to Lily ring hollow, especially now that Damien, Lily's unexpected love interest and Nate Hastings' retconned half-brother, may live on through a child Lily conceived during their brief but intense connection in that fateful train compartment, a twist that feels inevitable given Daytime's love of legacy children but also sets up a collision course for Lily's personal and romantic life, because while Kane, now a billionaire thanks to his supposedly reformed and now dead father Colin Atkinson's machinations, will no doubt attempt to use both his wealth and his guilt-fueled obsession to insinuate himself back into Lily's orbit as the grieving co-parent and would-be savior, Lily is unlikely to forgive or forget the chaos Kane wrought, at least not immediately, leaving the writers ample runway to build a long game in which Kane must not only weather the scorn of Genoa City, and yes, that scorn will be loud, with figures like Billy Abbott, Devon Hamilton, and even Phyllis Summers poised to hold his feet to the fire, but also undergo a slow-burn redemption arc that, if handled right, could rekindle Lane in a way that feels earned rather than forced, though frankly, there's still a contingent of fans who'd rather see Lily paired with Nick Newman, whose steady presence and long history with Lily offers a more grounded romance, especially after the operatic chaos of France, and while we're on the subject of fallout, we can't ignore the narrative elephant in the room, the baffling decision to kill off Chancellor, a legacy character who, while not heavily integrated into current front-burner plots, had the potential to be revitalized down the line, and whose death, rather than a less permanent write-off like a transfer, sabbatical, or quiet relocation, feels like a short-term rating stunt that robs the show of a flexible player, though, to be fair, the shock of it, Chance dying a hero as he saved Lily, rather than fading into the background, does give the show a jolt of unpredictability, the kind of no-one-is-safe energy Daytime rarely delivers anymore, and that shock factor, combined with Damien's death, which, while frustrating given the effort to rewrite Amy Lewis' backstory and introduce Damien as Nate's half-brother, does give Nate a rich vein of grief and anger to mine, creates a rare blank slate for the canvas as summer turns to fall, because now Genoa City must absorb not only the funerals and grief but also the ripple effects. Nate, gutted by the loss of a brother he barely had time to know, may spiral, clash with Victor Newman, and possibly double down on his ruthless corporate ambitions as a distraction. Phyllis, forever the opportunist, could parlay her eyewitness role into leverage over Kane or even pivot the French debacle into a scheme to reclaim power in Genoa City, and Victor himself, whose empire is always in flux, may view Kane's newfound wealth and ambition as either a threat to crush or an asset to co-opt. Especially if the writers lean into a corporate war arc to balance out the personal tragedies, and that's to say nothing of the looming question of Carter's motives. Did he act purely out of instability, or will some posthumous reveal tie his actions to a larger conspiracy, perhaps involving one of the many off-screen power players? Imagine a late-breaking connection to Jill Abbott, Colin's past schemes, or even some shadowy European syndicate, a twist that could retroactively deepen the maze storyline and justify its sprawling, sometimes maddeningly slow build, which, to its credit, did succeed in generating tension even as viewers grew restless, culminating in that unforgettable image of Damien's body collapsing with a knife in his back, Cain kneeling over him, and Phyllis entering like some Greek chorus. Equal parts horrified and calculating, a tableau that reminded us why soap operas, at their best, thrive on these operatic crescendos. So as we look to where the young and the restless should escargot next, the key will be pacing and payoff. Allow Lily's pregnancy, if it materializes, to serve as both a tether to Damien's legacy and a wedge between her and Cain. Use Chance's death as a catalyst for story rather than a forgotten shock. Let Cain's redemption, or descent, breathe over months rather than weeks, and, crucially, bring Genoa City back to the forefront after months of remote, almost anthology-style storytelling. Because as atmospheric as France was, with its train car claustrophobia, hedge maze menace, and moody vistas, it's the interwoven lives, rivalries, and romances of GC that anchor YNR, and fans, while game for globe-trotting, ultimately want to see how Victor, Nikki, Jack, Phyllis, Devon, and the rest react when all these threads come home. So if the show can marry the high-stakes energy of the French arc with the grounded, relationship-driven drama that made it a daytime institution, this massive gamble might yet pay off. But if it immediately pivots to a rushed Lane reunion or drops Chance's death into the memory hole, it risks confirming the skeptics' worst fears, that the murders in France, for all their spectacle, were a hollow detour rather than a bold new chapter. And with that, the real mystery isn't who killed whom in the maze, but whether the young and the restless can turn this morbid, chaotic feast into a satisfying next course worthy of the escargot pun the writers themselves practically invited. The murders in France are finally over, the Aristotle Dumas chessboard has been cleared, and the shadowy corridors of Cain Ashby's sprawling estate, with its suffocating hedge maze, sterile surveillance late in office, and those claustrophobic train compartments doubling as makeshift prisons, have been abandoned to the ghosts of Damien Cain, Chance Chancellor, and Carter. But now the question haunting the young and the restless isn't just where do we go next, but how can the show make all of this death and chaos meaningful? Because while the spectacle of the arc was undeniable, the shocking knife in Damien's back, Chance bleeding out after Carter's psychotic meltdown, Phyllis stumbling into the tableau of Cain cradling Damien's lifeless body, and the much-hyped gamble of building an entire murder mystery around a French mountain estate billed as like nothing else in daytime. The story itself left viewers split between awe and frustration, and the aftermath will decide whether this chapter is remembered as a daring, operatic experiment or a bloated detour that burned legacy characters for shock value. So the natural place to start is with Cain Ashby himself, because no one is walking away from this arc as complicated, compromised, and narratively loaded as Cain, a man who engineered a so-called summit of Genoa City power players under the guise of reconciliation and partnership, but whose hidden agenda, to win back Lily Winters while consolidating power, exploded into carnage, leaving him looking less like a wronged, brooding anti-hero and more like a manipulative sociopath who sparked a chain reaction of death, grief, and scandal. And while his last-minute decision to trade places with Lily as Carter's hostage cast him momentarily as a hero, the cold fact remains that 3 deaths, Damien's at Carter's hands, under the delusion he was helping Cain, Chance's heroic demise, and Carter's suicide, are now tangled in Cain's web. Meaning any attempt to paint him as Lily's savior will ring hollow, especially as Damien, Lily's unexpected love interest and Nate Hastings' recently retconned half-brother, will almost certainly live on through a posthumous child conceived during their brief but intense connection in that fateful train compartment, a classic soap twist that not only keeps Damien's presence alive but sets up a powder keg of conflict. Lily as a grieving, possibly pregnant heroine torn between honoring Damien's memory and shielding her heart, Cain as the guilt-ridden billionaire heir, his fortune courtesy of his supposedly reformed, now dead father Colin Atkinson, determined to reinsert himself into her life under the banner of co-parent and provider, and Nate as the surviving brother, simmering with grief and anger, potentially spiraling into ruthless ambition as a way to numb his pain. And all of this will need to be handled with careful pacing because while some fans are clamoring for a Lane reunion, just as many would rather see Lily find solace with someone steadier, like Nick Newman, whose quieter, grounded energy could finally give Lily a respite from the operatic chaos she's been dragged through. But beyond the love triangles and redemption arcs, the elephant in the room is Chancellor's death, a move that, while shocking in its finality, raises the question of whether YNR sacrificed long-term potential for a temporary jolt, because Chance, though underused, was a legacy character whose quiet exit, via transfer, sabbatical, or even Peoria, could have preserved him for future returns, whereas now, his death must be more than a plot beat. It has to reverberate through Genoa City, shaking the Chancellor, Newman, and Abbott families in ways that fuel months of fallout, from Abby's grief to Victor's fury to Devon's renewed protectiveness of his family, or else risk feeling like a rating stunt. And this ripple effect is crucial because the French arc, for all its atmospheric production, the foggy maze, the sterile train cars, the remote mountain estate, pulled YNR so far from its Genoa City roots that the return home has to feel seismic, a return to interwoven lives, corporate wars, and family feuds that justify the detour, which could be achieved by intertwining threads like Phyllis leveraging her eyewitness role to regain power, or manipulate Kane, Victor viewing Kane's fortune as either a threat to crush or a pawn to control, Nate's grief-fueled clash with Victor or Devon reshaping the corporate landscape, and even a posthumous twist that Carter's actions weren't just random instability but tied to a shadowy puppet master, maybe a lingering Atkinson scheme, Jill Abbott's off-screen maneuvers, or some European syndicate that retroactively deepens the Maze storyline and repositions Kane as a pawn as much as a player, giving the whole arc a richer purpose. And as all these threads converge, the show has an opportunity to balance the operatic stakes of the French saga with the grounded, character-driven storytelling that made it a daytime titan. Let Lily's potential pregnancy be both a legacy nod and a source of organic tension rather than a quick gimmick. Allow Kane's redemption, or descent, to simmer over months, forcing him to earn every ounce of forgiveness from Lily, Devon, Billy, and even Phyllis. Keep Chance's death alive in the narrative as a catalyst for character evolution rather than a shock quickly swept aside. And, most importantly,